go home at this point? Why did you make an ass out of yourself? And it would just like, it was just not a productive conversation with my inner critic, because there was just a lot of frustration where it's like, okay, well, I'm just trying to be happy. Like, and it really sucks to realize that you're looking for happiness in places like bars and the bottom of a bottle. So,
You mentioned focus. I feel like I'm one of those kind of people too, that I get focused on something and the damn world could be ending and I don't even notice. And yeah, so I definitely know that. But it's one of those things where it's great to have focus, and because it's so awesome. But then on the other side, you're just completely oblivious to everything else that's going on. So I think with everything, it's a plus and minus. Talking a little bit about what Tim had in mind for us as far as an assignment, we were supposed to write down our negative, um, what our inner critic was saying to us that was negative, and what the distortion was. And he had like a little list of some really good stuff. Which did we publish that anywhere? That list of distortions.
I think there was some copyright issue, so we were looking into it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Well,
because
in any
it was
case,
David Burns, but then I was thinking maybe I should just share it, and just attribute it to David Burns anyway, like
yeah,
not share it as our own stuff. So
absolutely.
like that way, that takes away that copyright. So you know what?
So then,
That's what
so
I'm
then the
gonna do.
distortions, and then the last column was what can we do to make, or what is a more effective description than the distortion. So like I wrote down procrastination. It's kind of one of the things that you know I really I'm still up in the air about whether I'm procrastinating or I'm just more like a perfectionist kind of thing. But in any case, procrastination. And I looked at some of the distortions, and I thought labeling. It was like a drive-by shooting and possibly jumping to conclusions. But my more effective approach to that is, really just maybe digging into my own fears and um, obstructions of like what is actually holding me back for the work. So like, is it just something about the work that I'm not that that isn't clicking? And when I did that, yeah, it did seem to kind of clear up the problem rather quickly.
Wow. And I noticed a pattern for myself, which is, and that came out perfectly after, I wasn't able to attend the last show, which is I tend to overwhelm myself, or like make a list of things that I want to get done. And it's like, all over the place, this and that. And, there's like 3 lists of things that I want to get done this morning or this day. And then I, I fail with a lot of them because other things come up that need more attention. And then it's like, it helped me kind of focus on what's going on the inside, like how my critical, how I really criticize myself harshly for not getting done, and that kind of upsets me, or that gives me like a baseline, how would you say, like a nervousness or like a negative undertone. It's not like something terrible, or maybe I just learned to to not listen to it. So, but it's there, and it's like I often have that feeling like, oh, I should have gotten this done and I should have done that, and like I feel bad because I didn't call this one and I didn't get that done, and I was supposed to get this done today. And but it's, if I really think about it, it's all, it's those are things that I set up for myself, because I decide, I make up my mind, I want to get this done and I want that, and that's my list for today and for this week. And so in the end, it's of course all my responsibility. So but that's a pattern that I have. So I was wondering if the list, if on that list is some descriptive word or like a category for that.
Yeah, well, the way that he described it was just 3 areas there, but I feel like, yeah, you could add something to that. Uh, I would say it is kind of a difficult task, as kind of Willow mentioned, to like identify those conversations we're having. You know, it doesn't seem like it's almost like an automatic thing we have with ourselves. And then it's like maybe a couple hours later that you think, oh, yeah, I was actually beating myself up, you know. And honestly, one of the things that Willow, you suggested that you said you found was the seven types of inner critic. I thought that was kind of helpful for me as far as
Hang
looking
on,
at.
before we get into 7 types of inner critic, I just want like make a tiny little announcement. We apologize to our YouTube viewers. The YouTube didn't hook up for the first like 5 minutes of our talking. It was just still flashing, and I didn't realize it because normally they all like, you know what I mean? And so YouTube got us starting sometime during the potato conversation. So so my apologies to YouTube for late. If you want to watch the beginning few minutes, we're all recorded on Facebook and Periscope. Continue with the types of inner critic. And I finally pulled up the checklist of cognitive distortions on my phone so I can refer to them as needed. I have it in front of me now. So I was trying to pull it up on my computer, and every time I opened the window, the chicken would flash to the viewers. So 2 fails, 2 for 1 fails today.
I stopped
Doing it
logging in underneath the Raising Excellence on Zoom because I was so sick of people asking me why there was a picture of a chicken, if it was my chicken. And I was like, no, it's not even my chicken. It's a chicken that someone else owns. It's named after someone else. It has nothing to do with me. I don't have this chicken. And it distracts everyone. Every time I like get off camera and I switch it, like everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at the cute little chicken. I'm like, why is this drawing so much attention? Sorry. I was just
I could change the chicken back to something else. I think I just did it for one day for the thing. But my desktop is also the chicken because, you know, I like this chicken. So it's named after me.
I also like loved the idea in my head of imagining our viewers coming in and being like, thought this was a therapist talk show. Why are they talking about potatoes? I don't understand.
It's the therapist next door talk show, okay? We're all sitting around the living room couch discussing techniques and tools. They can make your life better, and sometimes we talk about potatoes.
It's not normal potatoes, it's therapeutic potatoes.
That's right. When we talk about potatoes, it's not just regular potatoes. It's like
the jumbo potatoes.
And people told me that they really like this 4 spread of the videos. So
Yeah,
let's see how it works when there are more people. But, you know, so far so good.
I like how Mike is like, we're talking about the jumbo potatoes. And I'm like, we were talking about tater tots because Dennis didn't know what a tater tot was because he's in Germany. I love having those conversations with Deirdre where we're like,
rarely
what are
eat
you
potatoes in
eating?
Germany.
So I have the list of different kinds of inner critics. They each have about 3 sentence worth descriptions. So I'll just try and read the ones that are most prevalent so I don't take up so much time. Or we can stop in between each one. I'm not sure which one you want to do. But the first one is the perfectionist. They try to get you to do everything perfectly. They have high standards, especially for anything you produce. They try to make sure you fit in and you're not rejected. And it's expectations probably reflect those who have been important to you in the past. So I don't necessarily... I don't know if I have this kind of perfectionist. I don't know. Maybe we should stop in between each one.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of content. Like if you don't know what it's described as, you wouldn't recognize it in your life.
But hang on a second. How did we get
to talk about each one a little bit?
How did we get to the types of inner critic before we talked about our own distortion thing? Are we going to go back to the distortion thing after? That's my inner critic piping up, trying to interrupt everything, I'm sure.
Okay.
We can.
Well, I just felt like, to me, it was kind of difficult to do the task without kind of having a little bit better understanding. And it seemed to me like the 7 types of inner critics spoke to me, so I just brought that up. But we can go either way.
Well, that's actually it's interesting that you say that because I have found with some of my clients, it is more beneficial to spend time getting to know that part without actually getting to know, like, you don't even approach how they're talking to you, or you don't really get to have a conversation. You have to see them as they want to be seen. And until then, you don't get to a conversation. So I've told people sometimes, if you can't imagine that room that we're going to go to in our minds, then maybe we need to spend a couple sessions figuring out where these parts are. Where do they live? How do they interact with each other? Just sit and observe. So it's not uncommon needing to know more about what types of parts so you can identify it more clearly.
Okay, go.
So the second one is the guilt tripper. This one I have this one a lot. This critic is stuck in the past. It is unable to forgive you for wrongs you have done it or people you have hurt. It is concerned about relationships and holds you to high standards of behavior prescribed by your community, culture, and family. It tries to protect you from repeating past mistakes by making sure you never forget or feel free.
I've met that one before.
Yeah.
I remember as a child, I said something weird during dinner. Like, it was like I mispronounced a word and it was a bad word and I shouldn't have said that. And I was like 10 years old. And I thought about that for like days. Like, I obsessed about it. I was like, oh, those people. And it was people I liked and it was adults I liked. And you know what I mean? I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm an idiot. So.
Yep.
And they didn't even know.
I kind of wonder if some of these are more towards male or females, because it seems to me like this is one that's more of a female or feminine.
The guilt or the...
Yeah, it definitely, I could see it affecting women because for women, it's very, very important to have your social network. There's a good chunk, when you're pregnant and when you're going through birth, and then right after, you're very vulnerable. Your social network is very, very crucial. And strong ties to groups, like strong groups, actually minimize the risk of anyone, male or female, succumbing to mental illness. So I could see this easily. Like, this is something women use a lot, where it's like guilt tripping so that you don't mess up your relationships, because they're way more important to you than it seems like to everyone else.
But what does that say about the society we live in right now?
I was going to say
so
that.
Much more mental illness.
Social isolation causes mental illness. Is that what you just said? I think you just said that. People staying away from each other and not touching each other.
Let me try to be objective. We don't know that it causes mental illness, but we do know that it's a strong factor, and we do know that mental illness is much more likely when you don't have strong connections to a social community, especially a physical one.
I was just listening to a recording, I believe it was Napoleon Hill, and he said, fear can strike you dead as quick as a gun can. And I was like, oh, back then he knew it already. And now, how have we forgotten?
Fear causes your body to pump out the chemicals to run, disassociate, or just do whatever it's got to do. It creates the motivation, or the lack of, to do what you have to do. All of those stress chemicals and being pumped through the body repeatedly, it's like running high octane fuel in a car, and then no matter how old the car is, you put more and more. I think I'm using the right terminology. I'm never sure when it comes to cars. High octane fuel is like putting nitrous like in a car, right? Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know, but your response was way more intellectual than mine. I was going to say idiocracy.
Dennis, you got stepped on a little bit. What were you going to say? I'm sorry about that.
No, I was just thinking along the line of if what Willow commented a few minutes ago, if you reverse it, then that would mean that the high rate of depression and of anxiety and of mental illness that we are seeing, all over the place, seemingly, that at least over the last few years. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen some statistics for Germany particularly, but then I've seen it like in the street and then people around me, like even in Jamaica and other places. Then then that would, if you reverse what Willow just said, then that would mean that this indicates that the relationships and the societies that we live in are not strong and are lacking something. So then that leads me to think again, how can we use what we're talking about this week, you know, the inner critic, to strengthen, you know, our relationship with ourself, and how can we use that as a base for creating a stronger society and stronger groups that we are part of, to strengthening the bonds, even in our current situation, because maybe that is one of the things that our current situation actually points at. You know, it's okay. You know, like it makes it very clear to me that, you know, if you take away something that all of us, you know, took for granted, then, you know, it becomes more easy to see the importance of it. And then it's like, you know, let's start think about how we can actually strengthen that, and how we can really value the potential that we have as human beings, you know, to connect to each other, and to strengthen those bonds, even, you know, even with our, what do you call it, muzzle, and with all those restrictions that we have now.
First Conduit says fear leads to the dark side.
Sorry, when you were saying muzzle, that made me laugh, because I had an experience today that I didn't like. I went to a clothing store where I had bought probably like 4 or 5 decently expensive skirts, because I could not stand to wear pants all last summer, and spent quite a bit of money there. I've been there quite a few times. I really like it. I've promoted it. I've told many other people to go there. And I walked in today and they were like, no, you have to wear a mask. And I was like, well, you know, because I was with a client, so I was like, yeah, I cannot stand to wear a mask. Yeah, I apologize, but sexual assault survivor, and I cannot stand to have my nose and my mouth covered at the same time. It's not a good state for me. And so the look on her face was like, oh yeah, I totally understand that, but I don't know what to do now, because I have to make you wear a mask. And I was like, yeah, I was like, you know what? It's fine. You guys just won't get my money. So have a wonderful day. And she was like apologizing to me as I was walking out the store. She was like, I'm really sorry about that. I'm like, have a wonderful day, but I'm not coming back here, because like,
Did you tell her?
Went to that. Yeah. I was like, I love this store, but I came here when I was in a really crappy mood, and not crappy mood, but in a really bad state. And I was excited to have an opportunity to make a healthy change. And now you're just falling for all the fear-based, propaganda too. So like, I just, had to walk away. I don't know what that had to do with the conversation, but when you were talking about the muzzle and like,
that's actually so true. It just reminded me of something that's like a perfect situation with inner critic, and it hadn't even crossed my mind, because we right now here we have it's obligatory to wear it in public transportation and the supermarkets and stores and whatever. I never even bought one yet, so I don't have one. And I go to the supermarket and I'm the only one, literally the only one, even if it's full crowded, like that doesn't wear one. And only like children under 6 or so, I think, are free to not wear them. And here it's very funny. Like people here are very how would I say, generally obedient. So everybody wears the mask, everybody has their thing on, but they're also not exactly like, compared to Jamaica, not very impulsive, expressive. like people, they look, and they look a lot, and like when I walk by, like their heads turn and stuff, but they wouldn't like, hey, what's going on, and what you doing? Like that's not how things go here. And then but what I noticed is that the cashiers were like extra friendly to me. And then, like when they start to converse, they say, it's terrible, isn't it? And she said, yeah, like every time like I go around the corner by myself, I tear it off, and it's terrible, like I'm getting tired, I have headaches, and so but I have to wear it and this and that. And so they're really extra friendly. And then just yesterday, it was the first time, like, and I was like in weeks now, that actually somebody, was a young guy, he started to talk to me. He was like, hey, you forgot your thing, right? I said, no. But you forgot it, right? I said, no. Oh, it's like, but why? I'm not sure what you're doing, but like I said, no, like somebody have to make the start, right? You might look around, it's crazy, it's all foolishness. So, yeah, but they're gonna if you up, like if somebody calls and they come and they're gonna if you up really badly, and so It's like, well, that's to start somewhere. Like if nobody starts, like what's, is it gonna go on like that forever? And it's like, okay, you do what you do. And so, but that was the first one actually, like who, somebody who spoke up. And I just noticed while we were like talking with her that this actually, it was, this is a really great exercise. Or like I felt while I was doing it, it's like, whoa, like your heart start beating. It's like, whoa, you're doing something different than everybody around. And like I was talking to my daughter as well. She's just 16, and she's growing up in this, situation. And it's like I was pointing out to her, like, because she was like, whoa, like in the streets, everybody's like, what is that? And we're not. And like, well, I said, it doesn't mean that if everybody does something that doesn't make it right. So we talked a lot about that quite a lot. And then, she gets all kind of papers in school saying that, oh, yeah, it's healthy to keep distance, and you can't cuddle again and sit on the couch beside your friend and so on. She don't understand. And so it's like, okay, yeah, take it. And but we talk about it and give her a different perspective. So she can have at least like 2 or 3 perspectives and then make her own choice eventually. But so I was just thinking along the lines of the inner critic, because that was like, my inner critic was like screaming at me like, oh my God, like everybody, is like looking and whatever. But then I also feel that my like life prepared me in a way for that, because whether it's like for hair or whatever, like I was doing, it was often not the norm. So in a way, I think like I have a thick skin, and even like living in Jamaica and whatever, some of the stuff that I did, it kind of prepared me for that. But it's like I'm really astonished that I haven't seen anybody else doing that, and I hope like inside that I trigger some people at least to think, even if they don't want to do it, that's their thing, but at least to think differently. And so that's it's a great exercise if you want to risk it, like to bring your inner critic to, out to talk, and you're gonna hear him loud.
More power to you, Dennis. Keep it up.
Well, I was just thinking about how, like, yeah, that exactly what you described, where you're just like, your inner critic is screaming at you, what are you doing? Stop it right now. Go put your, go do the thing that all the other people are doing. Stop making this harder for yourself. And that's exactly what my inner critic would have told me before. And through a lot of work and a lot of, I guess I should just stick with a lot of work, a lot of self-work, I was able to actually have a conversation with this critic about, okay, I'm with a client who doesn't necessarily know how to communicate on a good level with everyone else, way below mine. I am the example here. Like, my inner critic, like, just kind of listened to me, and she was like, all right, yeah, you would not be happy with yourself if you didn't, like, make a stand. Because I was like, no, you're not going to make me wear a muzzle. And if that's what you require, I'm going to respect your private business. I'm going to respect the hell out of it. And I'm also going to get the hell out of it, because you don't want me there. And I that's what I explained to my client, because she was confused. Because I just immediately, I was like, we got to go. Sorry, we got to go home. And she was like, why? What? And I'm like, this is their business, and these are their rules, and I can't abide by their rules, and so I have the right to leave. So we did, and I explained to her, I was like, here's the deal. They don't want my money as much as they want someone's money who's willing to put a mask on. And I don't like that, so I don't have to spend my money there. So it was wonderful that I got to actually have a teaching moment with someone else because I did that work with my inner critic, whereas before I might have been very uncomfortable and then just allowed that to like rub off on her, and it just wouldn't have empowered her, which is my job.
And it is such a powerful exercise, isn't it? Like to stand your ground towards, the other people in the store, towards the cashier there, towards your friend. I mean, like when I'm there, it's like, I was looking, I was like, okay, your heartbeat is going up, okay, you start sweating and you look around, it's like, but then it's like logic, it's like, okay, but you fought in a cage, and you lived in the worst parts of, bad places like daily and so like that. That's nothing really compared to that. So I also noticed, some mechanisms that kind of kicked in, like, oh, breathe and look around, and don't look so serious, put a smile on your face, and then people around, like, don't look at the stuff, like look actually at people, posture up. And so because I noticed, oh, it's like, whoa, and then you don't want to make eye contact. It's like, no, not like, I'm not wrong. I'm like standing in my power, and like I'm doing what I think is right. So why should I be like that? So okay, like look up, and you've gone too worse, and there's actually nothing. So I think it's and the same situation that you had. I think those are, because, and I feel yours is even more powerful because you actually, you had a verbal conversation, you stood your ground, and you went the other way. So that's even more powerful. So I'm actually looking forward to maybe, some more people actually opening them out and saying something, or, me starting a conversation with people. Up to now, I just, hide resistance newspapers in the shopping carriers and stuff, any which part. And with the cashiers, I can't talk. But I think that's maybe like another level that I see myself moving, forward to find ways of being so calm and so relaxed, even about something like that's potentially dangerous. Because I've seen all the videos of even like old ladies getting pushed around and picked up by police for having the mask a little too low or something like that. But you can only do what is right, what you feel is right. You cannot live up to anybody else's standards. Or, I mean, you can, but it's not something that makes me happy.
You can try.
So if you have the ability to think critically and to think for yourself, then I feel we should use it and live up to our own standards, right?
I think you gave me a perfect segue into the next critic.
Hang on, before you go there, I have a soapbox. I need the soapbox. I have a hot topic. Because he said something and it triggered me and I need to go and it's just not going to happen. But before I do that, I have to convey what Adam said because I'm also responsible for these chickens here. So Adam says, under ADA, you can't be discriminated against if wearing a mask. If wearing a mask would impact your physical or mental health. Under HIPAA, people can't ask you to reveal your medical conditions. Works in the USA. So that's one thing. And yeah, of course. But how many people are going to go that far, right? To actually say, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. Sorry. You know what I mean?
And they make it a private policy, isn't it? Like the stores say, well, no, it's our policy. And, it's our policy. So you must wear a mask. If not, you can't enter.
Here, they just, over the weekend, they made it I think it's at least citywide. It might even be statewide where it's mandatory. The governor supposedly got caught not wearing a mask. So now there's orders for if you go into a building, you must wear a mask. But see, my point, sorry, excuse me. My point wasn't to find a way around it so I could still shop there. That's, for me, it's more of a, okay, you can feel that way. I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to waste any, you just lost a customer. That is way more important to me than fighting it and being like, well, I have a right to shop here. You know what? I don't have a right to shop here, and they don't have a right to my money.
Yeah. Okay, so soapbox now. So Dennis said that the cashier in the grocery store said she was getting dizzy. And there's a number. So let me explain it this way. This is the easiest way to explain it. When you hyperventilate, it means you exhale too fast, right? And that means that the carbon dioxide and the oxygen level in your lungs is out. So that means you have too little carbon dioxide, and you take a paper bag, you put it over your mouth, and you go, and that balances out because more carbon dioxide comes into your lungs, right? Now, if you wear a mask, at the beginning, it's fine. And even in this study I pulled up specifically to quote to you guys, this is a study from the 1980s about carbon dioxide poisoning by Chris Parmentier, Steven Verkamen, and Christian Schlemans. And it talks about people being sick and dying from carbon dioxide poisoning when confined to small spaces. But wearing a mask is very similar to being confined in a small space. Now, when you're breathing normally, like when you're at a relaxed state, I'm sure that you could wear a mask for days because you're just breathing normally, right? So maybe that carbon dioxide, it's still an elevated carbon dioxide level, but it wouldn't necessarily give you any symptoms. The minute you get tired, like say you're working and it's like hour 5 of an 8-hour shift, or you're jogging, or you're trying to rush, or you're talking too fast or too much, your carbon dioxide gets multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. It's all in the mask. It's all going back into your body. And headaches are just the beginning. According to this research, gets headaches, dizziness, confusion. So the cashier may not even be able to count your money properly. Well, she can't take money anyway, it's on machine. But you know what I mean? Like, there are certain symptoms that appear. And then they make the 3-year-olds in certain daycares wear masks. And that just, like, developing brain needs as much oxygen as they can, without it being too much, but as much as possible.
Have you seen the infant pacifiers?
No.
There's infant pacifier masks, and
So
there's
the baby's
all
plastic
Facebook.
screen.
No, it's a fabric. Like, they put it on the binky and the pacifier. So they put it in their mouth, and the thing covers their nose the whole way. And
I saw the plastic mask for the newborn babies in the hospital that are born right now. And
The
there's
plastic mask is actually not that bad because the air still goes in and out quite easily. It's the cloth masks that would do the highest concentration.
Yeah, but for a newborn, it's even a barrier between. It's a barrier, like a physical barrier between the baby and the mother. For them. But there's another aspect to it, which is and quite a few doctors have been pointing out that, which is that if you restrict not only the airflow but also the exchange with not viruses, obviously, because they easily pass through that anyway, but with bacteria, germs, and whatever is floating in and out of our mouths and facial crevices, is if you inhibit that, then that's unnatural in itself, because you basically limit yourself, and your immune system is not able to build up natural resistance against the stuff that we are supposed to be exchanging on a daily basis with. So which is known as well, like if you restrict movement, and if you isolate somebody like in a sterile room, then it's very easy to get sick. And I think we had it, was it 2 shows ago, when who was saying it, like about the farmers' kids who play in dirt, and they did some research, and they found out that those are the most robust and have a strong immune system, and are not shaken up by any disease so easily. And that's what happens. Like, we're basically setting up ourselves for what they call it, the next wave, or even like infections from different diseases, because we're basically not allowing our immune system to naturally maintain and build resistance against the things that flowing around all the time, every time, and that we are supposed to exchange with every time.
But there is quite a divide among people between people who believe in following the general consensus and people who are like, well, this doesn't make sense. What about CO2 poisoning? What about this study from 1989? And there are other studies. This is just one of hundreds of studies, right? It's not about masks specifically, but you can extrapolate. People can extrapolate.
Let's not even talk about the fact that it's a huge trigger for flashbacks and what that does for mental illness.
Well, like what Dennis
and for
said,
face reading, you can't tell what the person's thinking. So if they're about to stab you or slap you or kiss you, you wouldn't know necessarily, because a lot of that goes underneath that second half.
Yeah, that's something I talked about last episode when I was talking about like other customers smiling or not really knowing how to react to me smiling because I was not wearing a mask, and how Bessel van der Kolk said most of our sense of security comes, like, our nervous system literally calms down when we are in sync and in tune with the people around us, meaning you can read their face. Even if you're at the grocery store, you're all there at the grocery store. You're all there to buy groceries. And the person who's there to kidnap your children kind of has a different feel, a look, and like that. This is how sensitive our bodies are. They warn us of things that we're not even aware that it's picking up, but we don't know how to trust it. I think that's our biggest issue. So yeah, the mask doing terrible things for our health, mental and physical.
Yeah, I would just say, like that's kind of and what Dennis said at the beginning there about like how this relates to how it's going to affect our society and stuff is, we've got things coming up that essentially we're going to have a lot of people that are, experiencing, I guess what we quantify as mental illness. but anxiety, depression, all these things from this stuff. And, and of course, they're going to be, like, I'm sure a lot of people are wrestling with their inner critic now. Every time they feel like, why am I wearing this mask? I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense. Why are they making me wear? Why is there people like police like punching people in the face because they're not wearing a mask?
You know
It
what
doesn't
David
make any
Wolf?
sense.
You know what David Wolf asked on Facebook? Where are the biohazard disposal bins for the masks?
Yeah, because they're just
So,
everywhere.
but
Well,
what is it doing to our?
I was gonna say, Mike, the other side of that coin is people who, like I would have been a couple years ago. I probably would have put on a mask and I probably would have just suffered through it because I didn't know what anxiety was. I didn't know what panic attacks were. I didn't know what flashbacks were. I didn't know any of the symptoms I was experiencing and struggled with my entire life were symptoms of trauma. So I would have put on the damn mask and probably had a panic attack and then beat myself up over it because I can't be normal. I can't do the thing that all the rest of the people are doing, and I have trouble with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're going to have probably a majority of the people that are having to live like this having a real issue with their own, reasoning about what is actually going on. It's similar to like the Nazis with the, I always think of that picture where there's like all these Nazis are saluting Hitler, doing the thing like this, and there's one guy that's got his hands like this, and he's like, hell no, I ain't doing it. And it's the same thing, only worse, because it's and it is a it's a society version of a like a mental break, I guess, to some degree. And it does create a lot of questions in our own mind about what is actually going on. It doesn't make any sense. And
And
so, go
it
ahead.
does prevent us from talking back and answering those questions because you can't even hear yourself because you're just mumbling on the mask. So the mask is doing, physically that it's shutting us up. Like how are we supposed to talk to our own inner critic, much less to each other, with this, piece of cloth in our face. But anyway, like regardless of what people think of it, whether they think it makes sense or not, I mean that should be up to each individual to decide. And then, like if you feel you belong to a risk group or that will, protect you, then I feel everybody should be free to choose. Okay, like I go in the store, and if that protects you, then wear it, and that's your thing. But if I choose differently, then I should be free to do just that. Or if I have a store and I feel that there's no danger, then I should be free to invite people into my store, because if I don't make decisions in my store, then it's not really my store, isn't it? And
Yeah, but I mean, this is kind of like my fish story where the fish is being taught, how to, do adopt self-defeating behavior. Most businesses aren't operating on a margin that they can just be refusing customers for any stupid reason that comes along. And you've got all these businesses, and especially the big multinationals, that are totally rearranging their whole business model based on ridiculousness, and yet people are doing it. It is a reflection of this inability to communicate with their own reason and rational self.
and that's so true. So to use to continue with that word reflection, so that's the fact that if you look outside and everybody looks the same with a mask, maybe with blue dots or yellow stripes or whatever they put, but it's still a mask, and it makes everybody look the same. So it makes us, it makes humanity appear as like a faceless mass of people. So is that a reflection of how people, or how most people actually are operating, and how they are living their lives? So that's I think an interesting twist as well. It's like, well, is the outside reflecting the inside, even under those circumstances, and is that maybe a wake up call, for those who still recognize that, oh, maybe that's not the right way for me to find a different way of expressing
Here's
themselves.
here's a scary thought. What happens when the people with muzzles become so accustomed to seeing muzzles that that becomes the cue in their mind of synchronicity. We're good because they're also wearing a mask. They're one of me. We're part of the same group. What does that mean for the psychology? What is the mind going to think when it sees someone without a mask? You just literally divided, like, that creates such a division. This is something that's common with people in survival mode. This group of veterans were being treated by Bessel van der Kolk when he was younger, and they could not continue their treatment, even though it was a support group, until they gave him a watch that was like a commemoration of he was one of them, and then he could continue teaching them. Because otherwise, you're not one of us. You don't understand. You don't know what to make fun of. You don't know what to just be like, oh man, that was messed up. You don't know the social cues in that world, so you don't feel safe. It also happened to him again with another group of veterans. They had to buy him a uniform, and they had to commemorate making him one of them. So what is this doing to the psychology when, like, imagine how someone who cannot wear a mask because they will have a panic attack every time they put it on their face, how are they going to feel when something that used to be like they were just getting used to asking and reaching out for help and being like, I struggle with this and this is why, and that's a totally normal reason to struggle with it, but I'm getting better. Now they're just like back in the closet.
Yep.
Like, it's doing so much. What's the opposite of progress? Destruction.
Regress.
So much destruction to all the progress that we have tried. That so many people have tried in the psychology realm to try and understand and fix.
Again, you see, like, the medical industrial complex and the psychological medical complex, you're going to have big upswings in, pharmaceutical use for depression and anxiety and all these kind of things. And then, of course, you're going to have a lot more people that are coming down with diseases and stuff because their immune systems have been compromised. So, it's going to be a boost for the economy in that regard. But, is that, that isn't going to be good because most people are going to be, just wards of the state at that point.
And you also would have visually divided and sorted out, the ones that go along with a great plan from the ones who still, have a different opinion, a different mind. So that's a whole divide and conquer right there as well. And just as you pointed out, Milo, that's, the fear and or the split that you split people in groups and separate them even more. And then, of course, that's like, with Common Core and however they call it in different countries, the group think thing. So it's like if you have a big group and you have a small group, then it's very easy for, those who might still have like a different opinion, but who might be kind of on the edge or too fearful to actually, openly show it. They will, out of fear, rather stay with a mass group in our example. And and then it's of course much more attractive because it's much easier, and it's you don't have to confront your fear and step out of the big group. You can just stay in a big group, and the small one is eventually going to get smaller and smaller. It's going to get crushed, just as we see it from early days on, right, in kindergarten, schools, and so on. So it's just a continuation of a system, I guess, that has been worked for decades or even longer.
Oh, way longer. So this is a mammalian biological process. All mammals rely on social networks. That's why a lot of the studies to try and figure out humans have been on other mammals with the more complex the social structure. That's why apes are the closest thing that we can find, because they have a very complex social structure. But every single mammal generally lives in like a group setting. They have social networks, they have social standards, they have hierarchies, they have a society, so to say, or at least not society, social community. Yes, that's a better word. Thank you.
I think we should continue with the critic.
We should.
Maybe
We're gonna have
Well,
to
get
definitely
off on that
talk.
soapbox, but yeah, this is a topic that
Sorry.
pretty hot at the moment.
He
Where is
said
the
it.
critic? Did you
He
fall on this too?
started it. He started it.
Well, I think it's
I think it was.
fascinating
I
that
think
this
it
is
does actually address this though,
Mm-hmm.
because I
it
think
does.
everybody's doing that.
It is fascinating how we all have similar themes because all of our, I don't know if it's our inner critics that's talking, because it's so hard to recognize parts when there's four people that you're trying to pay attention to, and you're like, I don't know, I'm not, yeah. But
Okay, so what's the
for
next
some
type
reason,
of critic?
oh, the underminer, which actually we already discussed. We did not title it, but when Dennis was talking about like standing in the supermarket and your inner critic is just like, why are you doing this? You need to put your mask on. You need to just be like everyone else. That's the underminer, I believe. So the underminer is this critic tries to undermine your self-confidence and self-esteem so that you won't take risks. It makes direct attacks on your self-worth so that you will stay small and not take chances where you could be hurt or rejected. It is afraid of your being too big or too visible and not being able to tolerate judgment or failure.
Yeah, I think we covered that one. Let's hit on to the next one then.
Okay. So the next one is the Destroyer, which for some reason I really like this name. Just sounds awesome. It makes pervasive attacks on your fundamental self-worth. It shames you and makes you feel inherently flawed, not entitled to basic understanding or respect. This most debilitating critic comes from early life deprivation or trauma. It is motivated by a belief that it is safer not to exist.
So I know that one.
Yeah, I do too. It doesn't
Would
want
you
to
have
talk right
Please
now.
inform us.
example? Does any of you have like an example or like something you came across or you heard of or so that would exemplify? Or like a situation or so that you remember?
I would say that my previous story about like drinking and then waking up the next day and like just feeling the shame, it would eventually turn into that. It would tell me it like it did not it had a problem with needing to be intoxicated to be able to have fun, and then it would use like self-deprecating, like, you know, I think of all the other like junkies on the street. They don't care that, you know, and I knew I recognized that feeling that I just need to not be here. I need to be high. I need to be somewhere else. I need to be dancing, you know, just anything to take my mind off of it. It was so close to that feeling of just give me whatever drug you want. Like, I don't even care. Will it get me high? Because if
You
the
can
answer is
say-
yes, then I want it.
You can say fucked up. That's not one of the censored words. We're an adult show. Fucked up is
Yeah,
alright.
that's true.
It's about judgment. And
There are other
that's
words
what
you're
I
not
hear.
allowed to say, but that one's okay.
But
For the
the
mass.
destroyer would really come out after I would like be examining my previous conversations, and I actually realized it came out because of the it's motivated by the belief that it's safer not to exist. Like having that much fun and being that free is dangerous, and that can't exist. That gets you into trouble. So it destroys that. It destroys it. It creates situations where, you know, the more I try to accept it, the more insane it gets, and then you're like, destroy it even harder.
So, can you identify? Okay, Mike, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just going to say it kind of sounds to me like somebody like a drill sergeant, and you know, kind of how they do it with the basic training and stuff like that, where they basically take people down to their absolute like lowest element, and then they build them back up. But they just make them feel like they're just completely useless idiots. They can't tie their shoes. Nothing is right. Everything you're doing is wrong. You know, and then when you get to that point, and you just okay, I'll listen to whatever you've got to say. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Just stop beating me up. And
It's
that's
the one. Sorry.
It's a survival reaction, right?
It's the one that whenever someone is saying, you're a worthless piece of shit, or you didn't get this, you know, I'm not giving this to you because you're a worthless piece of shit. They're the one who's like, yeah, you are. And you know that you are because of what you did. You deserve to be talked to like this. You deserve this feeling. You deserve this shame because you are inherently flawed. You're just fucked beyond comprehension. Sorry.
So to me, that screams out judgment, or even self-judgment, or like the example that you gave, Mike. You know, others basically abusing and putting you in a situation, in a mode where you would accept the solution that they offer as the only one that is there, and then you know they just put you back together how they want you. And I feel that one of the things that came to mind first, how to address a situation like that, is in terms of, you know, judging yourself. Oh, I did, it was so bad, and you know, like your self-worth really is low, would be to accept it, to stop labeling whatever you did, and to accept that, you know, how you acted in that moment, or how even somebody else acted in that moment, was the best that he or she could, or that you could in that moment. So even if you now think it's crappy and it was different than anybody else and you could have done better, so but in that very moment, you know, that's what you did and you chose to do so, and for that reason, you know, without labeling, without saying it was good or was bad, that's what you did. And in that moment, that was the decision you took. You know, it happened, and just accept, you know, accept that, and accept it to be, you know, the thing that you did in that moment for whatever reason. You know, it doesn't matter right now, but you did it. And I think acceptance of the actions that you took is a good point to start to overcome that judgment and to overcome and I guess that's the inner critic again, saying, oh no, you're bad, and oh, you did wrong, and you're just like he, and like that, and oh, you do the same like your father did to you, and you repeat it, like all this, you know, like all this stuff coming back up. And even the situation with the army, it's like, well, how, like, if I put myself, if I try to imagine that, it's like, what kind of mindset could bring me back into my power in a moment where they would have totally screwed me up, and you know, I can't tie my shoes, and he's yelling at me. He's like, okay, well, I'm doing the best I can trying to tie my shoes. It doesn't work out quite well, but you know, still that's what I'm doing right now. So it's hard, you know, to imagine like an extreme situation like that, but that's where I would kind of start from to address it. How would you address situations like that in extreme? How would you overcome it? How would you put it in the positive, so to say? Do you have any strategies to that?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I get excited about this whole subject.
Go ahead, Willow.
I was going to say that identifying is usually my go-to. What I was going to say about everything that you said was all of these inner critics, it is their job to judge. So it's really like, a lot of people don't understand that word. They think that judgment is bad. And that's a fallacy. That's incorrect. I don't know which fallacy is. Please don't call me on that, because I know it's a fallacy. I just don't know the name of it. The destroyer it's a specific kind of judgment. It's a self-loathing. It's a self-hatred. And that's where the judgment comes, because it calls you these names that take you back to, I am inherently flawed. There is something wrong with me. I am shameful. Like, it's safer not to be here. So it's really important to understand that your inner critic is an excellent judge. You just have to learn how to communicate with them and see if their judgment is coming from self-loathing, or what emotion is it coming from? Is it coming from, I want to help this person? Because your responses are going to be a lot different if that's the question.
Well, I think it's tied into a couple different things. Certainly, I think trauma, you know, it's like revisiting trauma too. I think your inner critic has a tie to you know, like those things, like you're saying, like if you're in this kind of situation, more than likely it's some traumatic experience that you had that you weren't happy with what you did. But then also we've got all the stuff that's always fueling this inner critic, all the advertisement, all the media, all the trends, and all these kind of things that just keep the fuel of this inner critic constantly burning. And so this is also, and I feel like, kind of the situation that we're experiencing is another call to fuel and, pull up a lot of these traumatic experiences from our past that fire up the inner critic and, just make us more docile because we're beating ourselves up in a lot of cases.
In almost every single instance, when I get down to that exile with the destroyer, and I've seen them a lot. It's very common in trauma. The underlying lesson. This is a freebie. I hope everyone is listening because it usually takes people sessions and sessions to get to here. The underlying lesson that is wrongly learned is that you are responsible for what is happening to you, and you are not. But that's the only way your brain could rationalize it to survive. That's why it comes from early childhood before you're able to take care of yourself. You are not required to pick up that, whatever they threw down. I don't even know what it is. That's not your responsibility, but your part was convinced that it was its responsibility, and now it's really struggling and it hates itself because it doesn't know how to do this job. So yeah, freebie there. Exile, unburdening.
So hang on. Help me identify these critics. So if it says you can't do this, why would anyone listen to you? They're all gonna laugh at you. And what if I don't succeed? I think that was a different part. But anyway, the top 3.
I think that's the next one.
Oh no.
Let me read through it, actually. So this name is called the Taskmaster. This critic wants you to work hard and be successful. It fears that you may be mediocre or lazy and will be judged a failure if it does not push you to keep going. Its pushing often activates a procrastinator or rebel that fights against this harsh dictates.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But then it's always like saying, no, stay at home. Don't do it. Like, there's no point in doing anything because they're all going to laugh at you anyway. So why do it? Don't do it. Don't do it. So it's not pushing me. It's like stopping me.
Well, I would say this is probably the one that hits me the hardest is this one, because it is, and I think it has a lot to do with like how you approach who you are and then like what you expect of yourself. And certainly if you have high expectations of yourself, this is the one that I think you suffer from. But it really is about like how you go about the process that you succeed in things, more than it is about who you are or something inherent inside you. It's just like you need to know how to do something before you can do it. Like if you everybody on your street is riding bicycles and you can't ride a bicycle, it's like, I should be riding a bicycle. I know I can be better than that. But you don't know how to learn, and you don't have a bike to learn on. You're kind of stuck. The thing is that it is, to me, this is one in which I work with a lot, I think, for myself. And it is like, what is it that I'm missing? What is the technique or process or thing that I need to learn that makes this work so much easier? But in that interim, you do get the taskmaster after me.
Dennis doesn't have any inner critic. He's killed them all.
I embrace them. I hug them every day.
And then what happens?
And then I realized that all of those parts of myself are not my true self anyway, which is like always the shortcut to all of that. Anything, these things that change and take on different nuances and scream at you, and then they're happy and joyful, and it's up and down, up and down. None of that really is who I am, but we're getting caught up in it, and it's it's very interesting to look at it, to analyze it. But who is analyzing? Who is the one looking at it? Is that just another one, of those, or is it? Or where are we looking from? Rather, are we looking from another, persona, image, part of ourselves, or are we looking from that place? So because if you're not looking from that place, then we could spend our entire life, like trying to reach to the bottom. We won't reach because there's always something more and something else and something more. But I feel that it is not only identifying at what we're looking, but also where we're looking from.
Who's doing the looking? Who's the one looking?
Very nicely said. So I realized I actually missed one. That I think this one might be more up Agnieszka's alley. So this is the molder. This critic tries to get you to fit into a certain mold based on standards held by society, your culture, or your family. It wants you to be liked and admired, and to protect you from being abandoned, shamed, or rejected. The molder fears that the rebel or the free spirit in you would act in ways that are unacceptable, so it keeps you from being in touch with and expressing your true nature.
The molder sounds stinky.
There was some attitude there.
No, there wasn't.
So it's like kind of keeping you down and kind of
trying to squeeze me in a round hole where I'm a square peg.
I can see that a lot.
In me?
Like that feeling. No, not even. Generally, like, that's fear. Fear does that as well, right? Like you can't be who you really are. Like, don't even bother, like, look at it or try find it, because what you find, it will question your entire way of life, your entire way of being, maybe. And then you would have to question your job and your friends and everything. It's like, okay, let's keep like a little bit and,
You might have to change your friends if you say what you really think. What if they like turn their back and walk away?
So that's why I think that, like, when Dennis was like, "Oh, I can see it," like I can actually see it. Like I could see you having an issue with this one, because when you were like, when your inner critic said, "But why would I do it if they're if they're just gonna laugh at me? What if they laugh at me?" That's the it wants you to be liked and admired and protect you from being abandoned, shamed, or rejected.
Right.
But that's based on a lot of assumptions, and that's where I think a lot of like the media and the trends and stuff like that are the things that get us those kind of expectations that say, this is what you do to get people to like you. Wear this makeup, or this is the thing, you got to wear this kind of hat and these kind of pants, and
the hat with these big pool noodles sticking out of it.
and that's the one
that's
who
cool.
You truly are need to be liked. That's the thing. If you if you reside in your true beingness, like, is there any need to be liked? Does it, is it affected by that? Is your true being affected by, you being liked by millions or by 2 or by 3, or does it make any difference at all?
I think it does make a difference, but it's not like if 2 or 3 or 1 million people like me. It's who likes you, like, who's your community? Because once you find your community, your group of people, your social network, you might have more tools to handle the shit that you've been putting off for years, because you have that. Like, it definitely can go both ways. You can work on yourself, and then you can find a group of people, or you can find a group of people and they can encourage you to work on yourself. There are many options.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And even like with the self-responsibility as well, when you said earlier, oh, you're not self-responsible, and it might sound like it contradicts, but I don't feel it's contradictory, because you can, it depends on the perspective from where you're looking at. I always keep saying, like, I look at different levels, the emotional, the physical, the intellectual, the spiritual being. So it depends from where you're looking at it. It will all make sense. It's like, oh, like, if I look from a much more broader viewpoint perspective, then it's like, is there a possibility that I might actually be responsible for everything that comes into my life? Literally everything, even the family I'm born into, the people I meet, the guy that sits beside me on the bus, and every little thing. I see a possibility for that.
Yeah.
And then, and if you look at it from a different level, it's like, okay, but you're not responsible, for what happened in that moment, right there and how you react, because that's also just a persona, that's just a construct that's interacting, or that is liking or disliking the construct that you are working with. And it's still a reality, because we are limited beings. So we are, we have our physical bodies which are limited, we have our our mind which is limiting us as well, so we have our emotions which is limiting us. So we are, there's no way how we're not going to act with those limitations, because we're born into this world, this reality. So I can see how it is not an either or, but it's this as well as that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point.
So there is one last type of critic, and as soon as I
No
read
more
it,
critics.
just
Okay,
one
fine,
more.
one
Don't
more.
worry, it's one of mine. It's literally like my inner critic. When I met my inner critic, I thought this was the only one. I was sadly mistaken. I grieve so much for my lost innocence
Naivete.
and naivete, because it was so much easier. But this is the inner controller. This critic tries to control your impulses: eating, drinking, sexual activity, etc. It is polarized with an indulger, an addict who fears it can get out of control at any moment. It tends to be harsh and shaming in an effort to protect you from yourself. It is motivated to try to make you a good person who is accepted and functions within a society.
Yeah, I just have the indulger part of that. I don't have the critical one. I'm happy to be indulged. But the other one, he takes a chunk out of me every day, so it's all good.
I kind of missed a little of that. My sound went out. So
What was the last thing you heard?
well, I heard the indulger part, but I didn't.
She
get
said the
first
guy that yells at you for being too much of the butcherer is the same guy, or is polarized with an indulger who wants you to get into debauchery.
Yeah.
Was that?
And
Yeah.
they tend to be harsh and shaming in an effort to protect you from yourself. And it's motivated to try to make you a good person who is accepted and functions in society.
Yeah. So that sounds to me like someone that's maybe that has problems with addictions. That like at times they can be very good, and then they lose it, and they're off the the total thing, and it just like no matter what the reasoning is, it just seems like they always fall back into those same patterns.
So
And I think that generally is a result of something like this.
yeah, in IFS, the controller, the inner controller, would be the manager. So it's a protector, but it does this by managing you. That's all your inner critics are mostly managers. They're trying to manage a situation. The indulger is a firefighter. So you have protectors, which you can be a manager or a protector, and sorry, my brain totally crapped out on me.
Firefighter.
And a
Firefighters
firefighter.
and exiles. So exiles carry the burden. They are the ones who are wounded. When they are triggered, the firefighter comes out to put out the fire, to stop the trigger from happening. And that's why an indulger can become a manager if say you struggle to interact with human beings unless you have had your morning beer. That's a manager. That's a firefighter who has become a manager, because they're just preemptively trying to manage the situation and keep you from being triggered.
I feel so far that it is a quite interesting tool, and it points, or what I feel it points to is, or it invites us to do, is to just look more carefully at our inner talk, to identify specific categories that you just named. I think it's really interesting, because it made me look in a more differentiated way, and I could see myself more with some and less with others. And so I feel it's an interesting tool to kind of look at the mind chatter that's going on, and then it's categorized in specific ways, and I guess that that is the method that you just named. I forgot the name. What was it again? Where this
IFS.
IFS.
IFS stands for Internal Family Systems Model.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that what it reminds me of, basically centering and coming to yourself and observing what is going on, and raising awareness of the mind chatter, of the ups and downs, of the waves that are there, and without necessarily having to actively try to change and do something about it. But I think the part where you said that identify, I think is the word that you used earlier, that's the importance as well. And just by identifying, by looking at it, by noticing that it's there, without necessarily taking any action, even if it's an action on the inside, I think that is the most important step, right? And that in itself is already something. It's not necessarily doing something, because you might just be sitting, there
But it is
on the
learning.
sofa. Yeah, but there's a beingness in it, I guess. It's like doing that changes the state that you're in, and has the potential of just creating that awareness is actually changing your beingness in the moment. That's what I feel.
Derek Scott does a meditation where he calls it a room. He says, so have this room, and have the part, whoever is doing the thing that bothers you, or your embodiment of, or your representation of this emotion that's bothering you, have it go in the room, and then ask all of your other parts to stay either outside the room or like behind the doorway, somewhere where they're not like involved in the conversation, and wait until you're feeling calm and curious and compassionate and connected and all the other great C words that I can't recall now. We've gone over last episode. Check out previous episodes. When you're feeling that, and only that, you enter the room and you observe. And it's observing. When you walked into the room, where were they? Were they right next to you? Were they on the ceiling? Are they far away? How are they acting? Did they turn and acknowledge that you walked into the room? Did they ignore you? What happens when you get closer? What happens when you try to talk to them? Like, it's literally observing them in their state and just observing. So it kind of separates the emotions. And if you get in that state and you start observing this thing that bothers you, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I really just don't like this guy. Or, man, I really love this guy. He's like really cool, even though he's not said anything. You have another part that's blended. Another part has snuck in the door, like a child, and run in and been like, I want to know. And you have to deal with that part. You have to say, hey, I see you there. I see you came in the room. I see that you want to know what's going on. Would you mind staying by the door and not interrupting? If you would really like to observe, and then ask the other part, like, how do you feel about this part, observing what's going on? It's just literally mediating a conversation between yourself, which sounds insane. And it feels insane when you're the one doing it for yourself.
Well, I think, I think this is a really good exercise. Certainly it does involve, I think this is another reason that I feel so strongly about journaling, is this is an opportunity to reflect on things. And certainly I think, when you're feeling down, or you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling down on yourself, this is a good opportunity to kind of outline what those things are. And then when you do feel more stronger, this is your opportunity to really kind of delve into what those things are. What are the details? Tim had made some notes that he contributed to, and some of the things that, like you were mentioning, Willow, like, what is the voice? Is it like harsh voice? Is it a critical voice? Is it your mother's voice? All these kind of things can add detail to it that can, like, give you the hook that starts to unravel the thing. Because really, these criticisms are based on something valuable to you. And so, as we mentioned in the first episode, the idea is to really get to the point that you can love your inner critic, because they are bringing valuable things to you, and create the relationship that is necessary to really be who you really are.
There are certainly parts of me that don't like this conversation. At first, I started getting sleepy. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sleepy suddenly. What's going on? I'm like, oh, it's a trick. And then my shoulders started hurting. I'm like, oh, that's another trick. Because somebody, one of my parts, doesn't want me to be a part of this conversation. So there's all these distracting things. Like, I'm not sleepy now, but 2 seconds ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall asleep. I need to sit down. I need to go lay down. I need to step away.
I
The
heard your inner
challenge it
critic.
grows, right?
I heard your inner critic come out
When?
just now when you said,
I need to step away?
shit. No, when you called it a trick. Your inner
Oh.
critic was talking there.
It's a trick.
Self doesn't, it's not a trick. It just is what it is. This happened.
Right.
They don't put any inferred meaning on it. You had your inner critic who says, they're trying to trick me. They're not trying to trick you. They're trying to protect you. There's something in this conversation that is painful for you. It's not comfortable. You don't want to go there. And every time you've gone there before, you've gone up against it without any tools, without the proper tools, and you have failed repeatedly. And so eventually, you've banged your head against the wall so many times that you're like, I'm not going to do it anymore. This is why your brain's like, okay, we're going to go to sleep. Trust me, I understand the we're going to go to sleep at any given point.
It triggers growth. Maybe not trigger, but it's but it can start growth, right? You have to want it though, because I feel for most people it's like, if you don't look at it carefully with maybe the tools that we have been talking about, then it's just the voice in your head that puts you down, and you stay there, and there's not much progress there. But looking at it, acknowledging it, and recognizing it, the opportunity that it brings along is a potential for growth right there. To overcome it and to read, just like Agnieszka is reading our faces, to read the nature of the inner critic and to see what it's actually telling us.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show, but I do want to. I think I've started something new here that I like, and that is let's go around the room and what was the real gold nugget you got out of this that made a difference. I know this is a topic that could go on for a long time, but is there anything in particular that you found that was really good stuff out of this conversation, or even this whole conversation, the Monday show and this one as well?
It's a really good question.
I would generally, yeah, excellent question. I'm really glad that you started doing this. You can't get away from your parts. They can't quit. They can't leave you. You can't ignore them for long. You can't starve them. You might as well start listening to what they have to say. You don't have to do what they want you to do. You don't have to believe what they want you to believe, but they deserve to be heard just as much as your other parts. And I saw that eye roll, Agnieszka.
I was just like, no, I was just thinking I was certainly triggered in this episode. That's what my eye roll was about, because I'm like, geez, like I got triggered. But I think that there is the indulgent part that likes to be in charge. And even though I believe that it's not indulgent to eat the whole chocolate cake, because once you have a tummy ache, it's no longer indulgent, it's masochistic, and we don't go to masochists in this house. But there are some interesting things at play there. I'll have to look into it further. And identifying the critic as a helper, that's very interesting too. What did you say, Dennis?
I would definitely agree to that. And for me, it was also, just it gave me vocabulary, and it gave me like a differentiated way to look at it. I did not have that, possibility before. And it makes it more easier to look at it more carefully and to see what's going on right now. Like how is my inner critic talking right now? From what angle is he coming in it? So it gives me, it's like, you're looking through a binocular, and you're kind of adjusting it. You can see things more clear now. And so I feel that that was a benefit I had. And it also, right at the beginning of the show, it made me think of, back in my childhood when I was when I remember that, oh, there's this voice, this inner voice, and talking, and I felt that if I had to take a guess, I would say when I was much younger, my inner critic was much more tame and much more, not so critical. It was more, the voice was much more nicer and was phrasing things in a more, gentle way. And I feel that, probably there has been a change over the years as well, which is an interesting tendency probably. And then, so that gives me the confidence that, there's a possibility of changing it and of turning it around, because I can remember way back when, I guess as a child, maybe it's natural, you're closer to the source anyway. So there's maybe a different way of inner talk as well. Of course, also depending on the circumstances. But the gist of it is that, so I know from experience that it can be turned around for the better, for the worse. And with what we have learned today, I feel definitely empowered to turn it around for the better, and to see the opportunity and to grow with it.
Yeah, I would just chime in with kind of what Willow mentioned is you can't really run away from yourself. And these are things that are part of you, and there's a reason why. But I do feel like, like we talked about a little earlier in regard to like society and the people that are the powers that be, I think to a large degree are utilizing our misunderstanding of our inner critic to essentially act as our own jailer to some degree. And so we are really free, but we're not free if we allow ourselves to jail ourselves. And that's just something that, I mean, if you really are concerned about liberty and freedom, this is definitely one of the paths that I think needs to be taken to free yourself from your own critic.
Yeah, and hang on, let me just, okay, go ahead. Actually, I'll go after.
Okay, I was just gonna make a suggestion. If you want a entertainment like way of explaining how your emotions are your parts, watch the movie Inside Out. It's fantastic. It's enjoyable. It's family friendly, and it's actually educational. It's pretty spot on for psychology.
Nice. Now, I was just going to say that if some of the people who are joined us lately, they might not have heard part 2 or the beginning of this episode. So just go back to Monday. Monday, we started talking about the inner critic, and we really unpacked a lot of good material on Monday. And then today, we went even deeper. So this is our week about the inner critic. Michael?
Do we have a logical fallacy for this week?
I think we already talked about one earlier.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think Tim sent over a fallacy at all. So
okay, so we don't have that. What about next week? What are we looking forward to next week?
It's a mystery. There are a number of things on the table. A lot of people are mentioning this and that. I heard some rumors. Dennis saying it would be nice to do this. Somebody else said it would be nice to do that, but we have not made a decision for next week yet. So there are a lot of options that we're looking at.
So stay tuned for that. We're on Mondays and Wednesdays, 7:05 p.m. Eastern time. You can find us at if we need any more information or would like to talk to any of us about a particular thing, you can connect with us on raisingexcellence.live, the website, or our Facebook page, YouTube, Twitter, so forth. But we certainly appreciate your attention. We hope this was useful. If you feel like there's something that you could suggest to make this show better, feel free to throw that in. We're always trying to improve because this is about raising excellence, and we want that for ourselves as well as for our audience as well.
That's why we started so crappy, because, we had to allot room to improve. If you go back to December, it's not as good as this, but, next year it'll be even better.
Amen.
So there's only one more question I have. Willow,
okay.
Husband, is he all right? Is he still moving? Is he alive?
Your husband?
We discussed the cooking stuff, seafood.
Wait, say that again. I didn't hear.
How is Kurt
Yes,
after the failed dinner?
He ate the cooking.
Oh, he did survive. Yeah. I
He's
felt
a
bad
brave
for him
man.
though. I felt like the epitome of awful wife. Like, it's one of my things that maybe it was because I was like raised in the South, where like if you don't like my cooking, I can be like really sensitive about it. So I was like, yeah, I was not satisfied. It's even worse when I'm not satisfied because then I'm like, I know I could cook better, but I felt terrible. He did eat it. He ate as much of it as he could.
He's a brave man. Colleen wouldn't even like look at the food from 2 miles if it doesn't look or smell right. So
I have to sing his praises because I see so many people in relationships who are like, man, I asked my husband what he wants to eat and he tells me he doesn't know, and then he's not happy with what I make him, and I'm like, yeah, I usually go and ask him, I'm like, what do you want for dinner? And he's like, I don't care, I'll eat anything. Food. I would like food. And he will eat anything that I make him.
Nice.
It's great.
But you're a pretty good cook, so he's lucky.
This is true.
All right, let's close this box down until Monday. And I hope you have a good week. Michael? Anything
That's
else? Play the
I think
outro?
that's it.
Where's the
check out the website,
folks.
check out the great bio. The one that
Yeah.
is there.
Oh, that's
We're working on the bios.
Working on the bios. All right, I'm going to play the outro. We're going to wave goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. We like you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.